he's getting this stuff ready. I'd like to thank all of you for being here and helping in the celebration. And we will have a love offering to cover the cost of the meal, and I will set the basket over by the door. It is my honor to introduce Kathryn Chesley. She is a friend of mine. I have worked with her on the Centennial of Sarasota County. She also does Discover Sarasota tours. She portrays many different historic ladies, and today she is here as Bertha Palmer, and I welcome Bertha Palmer.
Well, thank you very much. It's wonderful to be back. It was a long trip, but it's worth it. I am Bertha Matilda Honore. That's how I was born. And I was born in 1849. That makes me 172 years old, meaning that, not bad. Well, if you're good in your life, you could decide to come back for small periods of time, and you could decide what age you want to be. This is the one I picked. Now, that means at 172, I do have some notes, and I do have glasses. You know how that is. All right. I was born in Louisville, Kentucky. And yeah, we got a Kentucky person here. My father was a hardware owner, and my mother was a wonderful, charming lady. I want to give you some names because if you've been around here and looked at those street signs, you're going to recognize some names. My paternal grandmother's last name was Lockwood. One of my brothers was named Lockwood. We had a habit of keeping those family names. Even if they were last names, we put them as first names. My maternal grandparents, their last name was Dorsey, and there is a Dorsey Street, and I had a grandson named Dorsey, so that name kind of filtered along in my life as well. Now, when I was 6 years old, I don't know what was going on in Kentucky, but my father decided it was time to get out. So he bought some land in this new development called Chicago. So we ended up going there, and he kind of changed businesses. He went into real estate. He bought a lot of land and then turned around and talked to his friends from Kentucky and said, boy, hey, we got a hot spot for you. So there was a whole group of people who came in from Kentucky and bought land that my father flipped to them. So my father ended up becoming kind of a real estate person. I had a sister and 4 brothers. So all of us moved to the area, the new area in Chicago, now 3 years before we got there. Another man by the name of Potter Palmer had already arrived there. And he arrived there and he opened a beautiful, what you would know as a department store. We did not have department stores, especially in the Midwest. You had a country store that sold you calico material and loose grain. So Potter opens a beautiful store. It had windows on the front of it. It had displays in it. He set up something new. You could buy something on time, and you could return it if you didn't want it. I know all of those things you do now, but that was the first time anything like that ever happened. So when we moved to Chicago, because my father was also in business and Potter was in business, they became very close friends. And there were times like this on a Sunday afternoon that we ended up in our house entertaining the number of people who were in the business world. And Potter Palmer came a lot to our house. And my sister and my mother and I went a lot to his store to do some shopping. When I turn around and listen to all of that, I'm realizing that something was ingrained in my brain that were 3 words: invest in the land. My father did that. He bought the land in Chicago. He had people moving there. He was flipping it. I watched other people do it as well. Now, when I was about 12 years old, this is according to Potter, when I was about 12 years old, he came to our house for a little afternoon tea. And he was quite enthralled with me as I was helping Mom set up the tea service and serve the people. As a matter of fact, according to him, he thought, now this is the kind of girl I would like to marry. I was 12. He was in his 30s. Now, luckily, he didn't say anything to my parents about getting married at that point, because I don't think it'll work. In the meantime, he decided to sell out his store to his business partners. So he sold out. I think you would call it COPD today, but he was having trouble, lung issues. Chicago was a very industrial city, lots of smokestacks, so that really bothered him quite a bit. So he got out of the business of department stores, sold out to his partners. His partners were Levi Leitner and Marshall Field. So Levi took off to New York and decided to become an investor in New York, and Marshall Field took over the business. In the meantime, I went to school. At that time, it's unusual for women to go to school, and if you did go to school, you really didn't study the heavy subjects, but I was willing to do that. I was very interested in history and geography and languages, and I excelled in playing the piano and singing. I would have loved to have gone into the theater, but that would have flown with my parents either. But anyway, when I graduated, I came back to the area. I was about 18 years old, and I had a number of suitors. One of them was Mr. Potter Palmer. Now, what happened was that when he left the store, he went to Europe and learned about for some health reasons, and he learned about beautiful hotels. You know, the Midwest was serving cowboys. Europe was serving the finer people of life. So he learned about hotel work there. So he came back looking very debonair. He got a new suit, a great haircut. He came back with a car, which I thought was very interesting, and we dated. We were engaged for 2 months, and in 1870, we were married. I was 21, and he was 44. Okay, mathematicians. 23 years is the difference. Now, was that a problem? No. My parents liked him. He was the most eligible bachelor around. He was very, very wealthy. He made a ton of money during the Civil War and some very interesting business connections that he had. So, worked for me. We had a 2-month honeymoon in Europe. Before that, however, we had a great, beautiful ceremony in my parents' home. And then we had dinner for 700 people in his gift to me. His gift to me was the Palmer House Hotel, a $3.5 million hotel built at that time, 1870. Now, the hotel wasn't quite finished yet, so we were able to have the party upstairs, and then he had to leave very quickly after that because his sister had passed away. He was from Albany, New York, so he had to go back for his sister's funeral, And I ended up at a small cottage on the water side of Chicago. Good thing, because 13 days after we had that wonderful wedding reception, Chicago was in flames, and we lost everything. The hotel was smithereens. Marshall Field's store was dust. My father lost all of his holdings. When Potter came back to the area, he said to me, I think we're going to find someplace else. And I said to him, it is the duty of every Chicagoan to save this beautiful city. You have to do something to do that. So he got a loan from the Connecticut Insurance Company for $1.7 million, the highest loan ever given to anybody. And he was able to then buy up State Street at a great price because it was smithereens. So here we are investing in the land again, right? So he put the money in the land, and then he rebuilt. You know, he rebuilt that hotel in 1 year, and he made it fireproof. He also built up Marshall Field's store and then rented it back to him for $50,000 a year rent. See what I mean? Invest in the land and make the land work for you. We lived, when the Palmer House Hotel was rebuilt, we lived on the top floor. What a beautiful place to live. The top floor, beautiful hotel in downtown Chicago. It was there that our two sons were born and raised. Our oldest son, Honore, notice what I did? My maiden name is Honore, and I named my son Honore. And you have a street. Now you know where it came from. And also our second son, Potter. So as the boys were growing up, it became necessary for them to have more playroom. Okay, so Potter decided to do another investment in the land. Over by what is now Lakeview Drive or Lakeside Drive in Chicago was a big swamp. A lot of the area was owned by the Jacobs family, John Jacob Astor family. So Potter said, I got a deal for you, I'll buy the land. And it was a swamp. What were you going to build there? So Potter learned to do something. Reclaim the land. If you're on a peninsula, and you know that in Florida, if you need more land, what do? You reclaim the land, and you put houses on it, okay? So that's what he did. So now he was going to build up a beautiful area in Chicago, and you have to start with one house, ours. The house that we built was the largest house in Chicago. It took 1 square block of the area, and it was done that so that people in the area could find out, this is the kind of house that we want you to live here. We had many servants who took care of the house. I called it the castle. Unfortunately, the community called it the monstrosity because it was pretty big, and I liked a lot of different architectural styles, and I put them all together. I thought they looked lovely. So he was rebuilding the land. At this point, our sons are growing up, and they're going to boarding school, and I'm in this big, beautiful house. What am I going to do? So I got involved in some national and international activities. First of all, my sister marries Frederick Grant. He is the oldest son of Ulysses S. Grant, who was the president at that time. He was also the lone survivor of the Custer's Last Stand fight, because he was called back to Washington for the birth of his daughter, and he missed the massacre. Lucky for him. I was invited to the White House many, many times. Guess who ran the wedding? So there I am in Washington, D.C., running a wedding for my sister and the president's son. When my niece Julia was born, Frederick and my sister Ida had to do a lot of work for the president. Imagine that, the president's family kind of having to work for him. Anyway, Frederick had to do a lot of that, and little Julia couldn't come with them, so I ended up with a little daughter kind of on the side. So my niece Julia spent a lot of time with us as well. Then I needed something to occupy my very creative time. Chicago was lucky enough to get the award to run the Columbian National Expo. This is the only way the world knew what was going on in the world with science and energy and electricity and farming. And so Chicago got the bid to be able to become part of not to become part, but to run the Columbian Expo. It happened in 1893, and it honored the 400th anniversary of Columbus's discovery of America. It should have been done in 1892, but there were a lot of political issues going on, and you couldn't deal with it. So I was involved in the women's building. It was the first time the United States government ever put up any money to honor what women were doing. I was the president, and it was a worldwide building. I worked with 114 nations and 114 alternates. So I was working with hundreds of people who were connected to nations all over the world. And I got a chance to meet some wonderful people who were running those nations. And what I did is I hired the only woman architect. I wanted everything by women. The only woman architect who was around. Sylvia Hayden designed the building. I put in books in our library that were written by women. I put in art that was only done by women artists in the area. And if you like brownies, it's because I invented them for that place at the fair. The focus of that building was very simple: equal pay for equal work. We brought in women who were doing whatever in their communities or in their countries, whether it was beautiful embroidery or knitting or cooking. And we wanted to say it's equal pay for equal work. The year was 1893. It's hundreds of years later. How you doing? You still have work to do. But that was my focus. Okay? I was looking at women's equality in a business area. Because you as a woman did not have access to your own money, even if your father left it to you, it went right to your husband. If your husband died, everything went right to his kids, period. I know, isn't that hard to swallow a sandwich when you hear things like that? Anyway, but I can't change history, that's what was going on. So that's what we were looking at. Now, because of that, I was able to meet up with a lot of world leaders. And in the next era, President McKinley asked me to be the American connection to the Paris Expo. So there I was in 1900 in Paris, running another exposition. So because of that, I was able to meet wonderful people. I got a chance to meet Tsar Nicholas of Russia and his family. I was invited to his coronation. On top of that, my niece Julia had grown up, and she married a Russian prince, Count Sopransky. Michael, also known as Michael Mikhail Katakazude. As a matter of fact, he lived in Florida for a couple of years anyway. So we had that connection. I also got a connection with King Edward VII, you know, Victoria's son, big party guy. Did we have a great time? Okay, so we were able to do lots of interesting things. Now, in the meantime, my husband Potter is 76 years old. And in 1902, the date when this dress was actually made, he passed away. We were in Europe at the time. His lungs finally gave out, and we came back and we buried him in a beautiful area in Graceland Cemetery in Chicago. At that time, his sons should have inherited everything. However, Potter, in his wisdom, left me most of the estate. It was about $8 million at that time. His lawyer said to him, I don't know about leaving Bertha $8 million. The woman is 54 years old. She'll probably get married again. And then all of that money goes to her husband. Potter's answer was, if she gets married again, he's going to need the money. So keep that in mind, because the money comes up again. Right after in the next couple of years, right after my husband passed away, my two sons get engaged and they get married. You know how that changes your life. And then I had a grandchild. Woo! Life is different. So that happened. Marshall Field, he passes away from pneumonia. So the store changes a little bit that way. King Edward in 1910 passes away. Well, the man smoked like 15 cigars. I don't know how many cigarettes a day, so what do you expect? When his successor took over, he was not interested in the party life. So I knew that that wasn't going to happen anymore. I did have an apartment in Paris. I had an apartment in England for, connections. I had an apartment in Paris because that's where I bought all my dresses because I was always voted as the best dressed. How nice. At the end of that, however, the year is 1910. And I'm in Chicago where it's in February. Imagine that. And I'm sitting in our beautiful, home. My father is there, and I open up the newspaper, and there is a small advertisement. It says, "For sale, Citrus Grove in Florida." Now, remember that invest in the land moment that I watched my father and my husband, turn over their assets and then double them and triple them? I said to my father, "Look at this. A man by the name of J.H. Lord is putting up some land to sell in Florida." My father said, he just opened an office in the same building that I have an office in the middle of Chicago. I said, "Invite him for dinner." 2 days later, J.H. Lord comes in. I said, "What's going on?" He said, "Bertha, listen, Europe is in hot water now. Okay, there's a lot of issues going on in Europe. They're losing money. People who own castles can't keep them up anymore. Things are changing a lot. I've got a place for you that looks like the Riviera." I said, "Oh, really? Let's go." So I got a private railway car from our friend George Pullman, and I took a 36-hour ride with my father, my brother, Adrian, who is my oldest brother. He's never married, but he was really instrumental in taking care of a lot of our family businesses, and a large staff. And we came down, we got to Tampa on the railway, and then we had to get on a boat in order to get to Sarasota. Got here, there was no place to stay. The hotel that was here that John Gillespie put together was in decrepit shape. So Dr. Joseph Halton, who had a sanitarium, it's not for crazy people. It's people who just need to relax. That was their healing vibes at the time. So they cleared out a lot of that area in the sanitarium. We were able to bring in our entire group there of all the people who were traveling with me. And I met up with a man by the name of Arthur Burton Edwards. You know him as A.B. Edwards. He was the real estate agent that was working with J.H. Lord. So he showed me around. I was extremely impressed. The first piece of property I bought was about 13 acres for about $11,000 over on what you know of as Osprey. It was right on the water. It was beautiful. There was a little house there. And I thought, well, this is lovely. Okay. Now, again, it was February 1910. Beautiful weather. So by the end of probably about 2 years, remember that invest in the land? I bought 140,000 acres. Now, I needed a little house, so I brought down Thomas Reed Martin, who was a favorite architect of mine. I said, we need a little house, but I'm so busy designing gardens, because when you live in Paris and you live in England, every beautiful house has beautiful gardens. So I wanted that to happen in Florida. What did I know about growing Florida flowers? So I learned about them. I was planting flowers, and I had Thomas Reed Martin come down and just kind of fix up the house, give it some more bedrooms. We made it 12 bedrooms. They were all overlooking the water because that's what you wanted to see here. And that was working out for us very nicely. When I ended up with 140,000 acres, the next question is, what are you going to do with this? So I did what my father and my husband would have done. I developed what you know of as subdivisions. Subdivisions. So you have a plot of land, everybody gets a little house, You share in the, and by the way, at that time, because Chicago was still kind of industrial, and the idea was that all this industrial carbon in the area is not good for you. You should be out on the land. You should be breathing clean air. So that clean air movement got people right to Florida, right? Because where's their clean air? Here. So it was an easy sell. The first place I bought, the first place I was fixing up was on 10th Street and Tamiami for you, in that area. That's where the Whitaker family's first house was. They were the first married couple. William and Mary Jane Whitaker lived there. Right now there's a huge retirement home there called Sarah Bay, but that's where their house was. And that's the plot of land that I bought. And guess who was the first people who bought a house? My uncle. My Uncle Benjamin and my Aunt Julia bought a house. They ended up building a house right where the Whitaker family lived. They call it the Acacias, and it was a beautiful house right in that area. Then I bought a lot of property around Bee Ridge. Isn't that where we are now? Bee Ridge at the time was not just a street, it was a whole community. And called that way because there was a lot of bees around. But I ended up making a subdivision. Now, how do you do that? Well, first of all, you bring in heavy-duty machinery, which I had, and we made streets. There were no streets here, okay? So we made streets, curbs, we built churches, because you know that's going to bring people. We built schools, then we built the houses. The problem was that as I was making all of these subdivisions, either in like downtown Sarasota or over in Bee Ridge, and a huge one over in Osprey, there were no roads that got from one place to another. I said, why are there no roads here? The answer was, well, Manatee, we were in Manatee County at that time. The Manatee County people who are up in Bradentown, which is what it was called at that time, like it the way it is. And they're planning to have a roads built. However, that road is going to go from Bradentown across the state to maybe Arcadia and down the eastern side, not through Sarasota. And I said, you need roads here. How are people going to get their products to market without roads? How are people going to get from one subdivision to another without roads? So I sent my brother Adrian, who became my lawyer, I said, you go to the capital here, Tallahassee, and you find out what we need to do to create our own county. My idea. The year was 1912. So as I was investing in all the land here and building things up, I ended up becoming interested in a large piece of land in Myaka Park. I bought a ranch. I bought a ranch, and with the ranch came 3,000 head of cattle. What did I know about that? Okay, but what did I know about growing crops here? So I contacted the government, I got pamphlets, I got books, I learned about things, and I opened my own ranch. It was called Meadow Sweet Pastures, and we changed farming around here. It was not an easy thing to do. Most of the ranchers who were here for a lifetime. They always did it one way. I'm coming in saying, we're going to do it different. Why were they going to listen to a woman, especially a woman like me from the Midwest? What did I know? I'll tell you what I know. I knew how to get rid of tick fever. It was making the cows here skinny, scrawny. How are you going to sell a cow like that for any kind of money? My cows were big, fat, plump, healthy, and I made a lot of money. So finally, the ranchers around here did the same thing to their cows that I did to mine, and tick fever was gone. It was not an easy battle. Some of the battles were people here did not know how to work well. Okay? They would take off, they would go fishing. So I brought in workers from other states. I don't care what color you were. As long as you were a good worker, you were on my team. And I paid the highest wages, and I gave you the best places to stay. I even developed an area so that we could have parties. It's called Eagle Point. Right now it's a little gated community going into Venice, but that was a place that I built up to entertain and to have my staff there. After 8 years in Sarasota. I moved here in 1910. Around 1916, 17, I developed breast cancer. Now, I went to New York and had a mastectomy. I won't even tell you what that was like at that time. It gave me a couple more months. However, by 1918, I passed away here in Florida after somewhat of a struggle. I passed away in the house, surrounded by my beautiful paintings, because I was an avid collector of paintings, especially paintings by the Impressionists. As a matter of fact, Monet got a garden because I gave him the money to buy the land. So keep that in mind. So surrounded by my beautiful paintings and Bertha Honoré roses, which were named after me, I passed away. It was nice of the city. They put the flag down half-mast on the day that I passed away, so it was very nice. I was then buried back next to Potter over in Graceland Cemetery in Chicago. Now, remember that $8 million I was left? I almost tripled it by the time I passed away with the investments that we made in the areas that were here. We changed farming around, we changed ranching around, we changed lifestyle around, and we helped separate eventually Sarasota from Manatee County, so that Sarasota was finally able to get the road that they needed, even though it's a challenge to get from Tampa to Miami, especially going through the Everglades, because they really did a number on the ecological system at that point. But that's what they had to do in order to get those roads going. So I was able to give Sarasota a lot. I had helped the Garden Club and the Beautification Committee fix up Sarasota areas. I gave them money for street lamps so that the streets could be lit at night. So I really enjoyed what I was doing here, and I'm very proud of what I left here. I left my sons here. My son Honoré built a house. He called it Immokalee. It's where the landings are. His son, no, not his son, his good friend Stanley Field, who was Marshall Field's nephew, built the Field House here. So they were great friends. That's how all of that happened. If you live in Palmer Ranch or you know somebody who was there, that was Honoré's ranch event, because at the end, Honoré got most of the property here. Potter took the property over in Chicago, the big house and that sort of thing. So I'm very happy with what I did. And I think one of the nicest things that ever was said about me was the following. A.B. Edwards, who was the mayor here for years, was interviewed, and he said, "The most notable, important, outstanding, and far-reaching development for Sarasota and the entire Bay Area was when Bertha Honoré Palmer and her family came here in 1910. That interview was given in 1958. And here we are in 2021, still talking about some of the things that were started long ago by a woman. So thank you very much for coming here this afternoon and having a little lunch and enjoying your festivities and inviting me to come back and share some of my life with you. Thank you. Thank you. Are there any questions that you would like? I think we've got 5 more minutes or whatever. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them. Yes, a question.
Was in the movie A Wonderful Life, was Mr. Potter related to your story at all?
You know, I know it was a surprise for you when I said that Potter Palmer developed the idea of a department store, because that idea goes to Marshall Field or Harry Selfridge, you know, over in England. Unfortunately, sometimes the people who really say the first idea first don't get honored by it. So there's not a lot of information about, you know, Potter being connected to that film. I'd like to think that he was like that individual, but I can't say for sure. Yes? Well, first of all, Palmer is a very common name, you know, like Arnold. So I don't think we're related. What happened was my son Honore's two sons, who would have carried down the Potter name, both passed away. One from an unfortunate disease when he was almost 20. My second grandson, D'Orsay, was married 4 times, and he was caught in a barroom brawl, got kicked in the face here in Sarasota, and passed away. So those two Palmers didn't. And Potter had 4 children, and 2 of them carried on the Palmer name from our family. All right, well, again, thank you very much. I do portray 8, going on 10 different women in Sarasota, so if you belong to an organization and would like some information, there's cards here which tell you how you can connect to me. So thank you very much. Enjoy your time. Oh, you know, I can tell you that the Sarasota Centennial is still being celebrated. In another part of my life, I made a movie about the struggle that Sarasota had. It's called The Roads We Travel to Sarasota County, and it is available to use by your organization. It is connected to the Historical Society of Sarasota County, where I am a board member, and the only thing you need to do is to give us a donation, and then you'll be able to use that video. It runs for about an hour. Discover Sarasota Tours has tours going out as different characters. So if you are new to the area, you probably want to take one of those tours to find out what's going on. And we do have 2 historic markers that are coming up in honor of the centennial, so watch for information. And oh my gosh, Marilyn did a great job in doing auto tours. Did you tell these people about that? Oh my gosh. Marilyn and I were on the, are on the 2021 committee to celebrate the centennial. How much celebration can you do in this pandemic? All right, so here we are. Anyway, in order to help us learn more about this, Marilyn and another person on the committee put together auto tours. On your phone, you download, this is easy to do, the auto tours from the centennial, and that will take you on a journey around a community. They'll tell you where to park. They'll tell you where to make all the turns, you know, like GPS. And then they'll tell you where to park, and they'll tell you the history of that building, that area, who was here. And you're doing it in the comfort of your own car on your time for free. All right, so download that, absolutely.
And that's just like having me ride the car.
Yeah, that's right. And she's fabulous, fabulous. Okay, enjoy. Thank you very much.